Hello, and welcome to Scrum Master Certification course. Let's begin by looking at an overview of Agile. What is Agile? Why is it useful? Who can use Agile? And other concepts of Agile in brief. So first, let's see what is Agile. According to popular Agile guru Jim Highsmith, being Agile is to possess the ability to both create and respond to change in order to profit in a turbulent business environment. Agility is the ability to balance flexibility and stability. Agile is being adaptive to change, being flexible, being able to cope with change. Now let's seek answers for the next question. What is the need for Agile? Before we answer this question, let's look at the factor that contributed to the development of this approach. We will take the example of the smartphone market to understand the need for adaptability. Rapidly changing market and technology, the need to be cutting edge, shrinking the time to market of products, and increased innovation from the customer end, reduction of testing and experimentation costs, simulations and automation. Customer value is delivered at point of sale, not at the point of plan. Need for an adaptive method of development rather than traditional predictive methods. It is in such rapidly changing environments that predictive methods do not succeed, and we seek adaptive methods for project management. It's interesting to note that the practice of Agile is not restricted to software development only. It can be used in any project irrespective of its complexity. Any industry that faces rapid changes will find Agile helpful. Fast-paced changes in technology, systems, as well as in customer behavior have rendered traditional models of management inefficient. The failure of these models has given rise to methodologies with Agile values. In our next module, we will learn about adaptive project management. Thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome to Scrum Master Certification course. In this module, we will discuss the Agile Principles. The first principle is customer satisfaction. The highest priority of any project managed using an Agile methodology is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Next is welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. In the current market, in which customer requirements, available technologies, and patterns of business keep changing, it is essential to approach product development in an adaptive manner that enables change incorporation and fast product life cycles, rather than emphasizing following plans formed with potentially outdated data. The third principle is deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference for the shorter timescale. Real value is delivered to the customer primarily in the form of working software. Therefore, the Agile focus is on delivering working software in increments throughout the product lifecycle. The fourth principle is that the business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Traditionally, customers or business people have been seen as outside players who are involved mainly at the start and end of the product lifecycle, and whose relationships are based on contracts and their fulfillment. But Agile believes in a shared value approach in which customers are seen as collaborators. The team and customers work together to evolve and develop the product. The fifth principle is to build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. Agile believes that the key actors in any project are the people, and thus the emphasis should be on them and their interactions. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within the development team is face-to-face conversation. This is so because face-to-face communication is more dynamic when compared to other modes such as paper, telephone, or email. This is the sixth principle. The seventh principle is that the working software is the primary measure of progress. Unlike methods which evaluate project success on the basis of meeting the planned targets, Agile measures the success of a project or its progress based on the value delivered to the customer. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Maintaining a sustainable pace of work also helps improve quality of product delivery over a period of time. This is the eighth principle. The ninth principle is that continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Some of the ways of ensuring this are continuous integration, refactoring, and incremental re-architecture. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. This is the 10th principle. This principle can be adhered to through use of small feature sets, focusing on client value, ensuring good upfront design and model, etc. The 11th principle is that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. The key for adherence to this principle is placing emphasis on people or empowering people to make key project decisions and trusting their ability to deliver the required solutions. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. This is the 12th and last Agile principle. This brings us to the end of the module on Agile Principles. Thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome to yet another video on SMC. In this video, we'll look at how Agile methods differ from traditional management methods. The waterfall model is suitable for ordered and predictable projects in which all the requirements are clearly defined and can be estimated accurately. In most industries, such projects are dwindling. Changing requirements from customers have led to increased pressure on businesses to adapt and change their delivery methods. Agile methods are more successful in the current market scenarios, which are marked by unpredictability and volatility. Agile methods are based on inspect-adapt cycles, as opposed to the command and control structures of the waterfall method. Agile methodologies require a change in mindset. The central focus has moved from scope in waterfall methods to achieving maximum business value in Agile. In waterfall, cost and schedule are altered to ensure the desired scope is achieved, while in Agile, quality and constraints can be altered to achieve the main objective of attaining maximum business value. In Agile, the emphasis is on the people, as against process in the traditional method. Agile is best suited for unpredictable or exploratory domains, and the process style is iterative. There is low upfront planning, and the management style is decentralized. A traditional setup works best for predictable domains, and the process style is linear. There's a lot of upfront planning, and the management style is typically autocratic. Agile projects are completed in an iterative manner, where the functionalities with the highest business value are completed first. Various cross-functional teams work in parallel across sprints to deliver potentially shippable solutions at the end of every sprint. Each iteration results in a shippable deliverable, which provides a measurable objective that the team has to accomplish. This ensures that the team is progressing and the project will be completed on time. Traditional methods do not present such timely checks and therefore result in situations in which the team might get off schedule and end up with a lot of work towards the end. As the customer regularly interacts with the team, the work completed is regularly reviewed. This ensures that the progress is as per customer expectations. To the contrary, in waterfall there is no such interaction, as the work is carried out in silos, and there is no presentable functionality until the end of the project. Further, in complex projects where the customer is unclear about what they want in the end product, and where the functionality requirements keep changing, the iterative model is more flexible in ensuring that these changes get included before the project is complete. On the other hand, when projects are simpler, have well-defined functionalities, and when the team has previous experience working on such projects, then the waterfall method is more successful. That brings us to the end of this module. We hope this video has clarified some doubts about adaptive project management. Thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome to ScrumMaster Certification course. In this module, we will discuss the methods used in Agile. A number of Agile methodologies originated and gained traction in the 1990s and the early 2000s. While the various Agile methods differ in a variety of aspects, their commonality stems from their adherence to the Agile Manifesto. Let's briefly discuss some of the important Agile methods. The first method that we will discuss is Lean Kanban development. The Lean concept optimizes an organization's system to produce valuable results based on its resources, needs, and alternatives, while reducing waste. Kanban literally means a signboard, and it espouses the use of visual aids to assist and track production. Lean Kanban integrates the use of the visualization methods as prescribed by Kanban, along with the principles of Lean, creating a visual incremental evolutionary process management system. The next is extreme programming. XP makes it possible to keep the cost of changing software from rising radically with time. The key attributes of XP include incremental development, flexibility scheduling, automated test codes, verbal communication, ever-evolving design, close collaboration, and tying in the long-term and short-term drives of all those involved. XP values communication, feedback, simplicity, and courage. The different roles in the XP approach include the customer, the developer, the tracker, and the coach. XP prescribes various coding, developer, and business practices, events, and artifacts to achieve effective and efficient development. XP has been extensively adopted due to its well-defined engineering practices. The third method is crystal methods. Crystal methods are intended to be people-centric, lightweight, and easy to adapt. Because people are primary, the developmental processes and tools are not fixed, rather are adjusted to the requirements and the characteristics of the project. The color spectrum is used to decide on the variant for a project. Factors such as comfort, discretionary money, essential money, and life play a vital role in determining the weight of the methodology, which is represented in various colors of spectrum. The crystal family is divided into crystal clear, crystal yellow, crystal orange web, crystal red, crystal maroon, crystal diamond, and crystal sapphire. All crystal methods have 4 roles: the executive sponsor, the lead designer, developers, and experienced users. Crystal methods recommend various strategies and techniques to achieve agility. A crystal project cycle consists of chartering, delivering cycle, and wrap-up. The fourth method is dynamic systems development methods. DSDM sets quality and effort in terms of cost and time at the outset and adjusts the project deliverables to meet the set criteria by prioritizing the deliverables into musts, shoulds, coulds, and won't-haves, or Moscow. DSDM is a system-oriented method with 6 distinct phases: pre-project phase, the feasibility phase, exploration and engineering phase, deployment phase, and benefit assessment phase. The fifth method is feature-driven development. FDD was devised by Jeff DeLuca in 1997 and operates on the principle of completing a project by breaking it down into small, client-valued functions that can be delivered in less than 2 weeks' time. FDD has 2 core principles. Software development is a human activity, and software development is a client-valued functionality. FDD defines 6 major roles: project manager, chief architect, development manager, chief programmers, class owners, and domain experts, in addition to a number of supporting roles. The FDD process is iterative and consists of developing an overall model, building a feature list before planning, designing and building by feature. The sixth method is test-driven development. Test-driven development is a software development method that involves writing automated test code first and developing the least amount of code necessary to pass that test later. The entire project is broken down into small, client-valued features that need to be developed in the shortest possible development cycle. Based on clients' requirements and specifications, tests are written. The tests designed in the above stage are used to design and write the product code. TDD can be categorized into the following 2 levels: A TDD, acceptance TDD, requiring a distinct acceptance test, and D TDD, developer TDD, entails writing a single developer test. TDD has become popular because of the numerous advantages it offers, like rapid and reliable results, constant feedback, and reduced debugging time. The seventh method is adaptive software development. Adaptive software development grew out of rapid application development work by Jim Highsmith and Sam Bayer. The highlights of ASD are constant adaptation of processes to work at hand, provision of solutions to problems surfacing in large projects, and iterative, incremental development with continuous prototyping. Being a risk-driven and change-tolerant development approach, ASD believes a plan cannot admit uncertainties and risks, as these 2 indicate a flawed and failed plan. ASD is feature-based and target-driven. The first phase of development in ASD is speculation, as opposed to planning in the other Agile methodologies, followed by collaborate and lean phases. The 8th method is Agile Unified Process. AUP is a simplified version of IBM's Rational Unified Process and was developed by Scott Ambler. AUP combines industry-tried and tested Agile techniques such as test-driven development, Agile modeling, and database refactoring to deliver working product of the best quality. AUP models its processes and techniques on the values of simplicity, agility, customizability, self-organization, independence of tools, and focus on high-value activities. The AUP principles and values are put into action in phases. inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. And the last Agile method that we will discuss is domain-driven design. Domain-driven design is an Agile development approach meant for handling complex designs, along with evolving the overall project system. Domain can be defined as an area of activity to which the user applies a program or functionality. Many such areas are batched, and a model is designed, which is a system of abstractions that can be used to design the overall project and solve the problems related to the batch domains. The core values of DDD include domain-oriented, model-driven design, ubiquitous language, and bounded context. In domain-driven design, ubiquitous language is established, and the domain is modeled. Then design, development, and testing follow, refining and refactoring of the domain model till it is satisfactory. This brings us to the end of the module on Agile methods. Thank you for learning with us.
Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Master course. Scrum Master course provides guidelines for the successful implementation of Scrum. So isn't it necessary that we know a little more about Scrum? Let's take a look. A Scrum project involves a collaborative effort to create a new product, service, or other result as defined in the project vision statement. All projects are impacted by constraints of time, cost, scope, quality, resources, organizational capabilities, and other limitations that make them difficult to plan, execute, manage, and ultimately succeed. However, successful implementation of the results of a finished project provides significant business benefits to an organization. It is therefore important for organizations to select and practice an appropriate project management framework. And this is where Scrum comes in. So what is Scrum? Scrum is one of the most popular Agile frameworks. It is an adaptive, iterative, fast, flexible, and effective methodology designed to deliver significant value quickly and throughout a project. Scrum ensures transparency in communication and creates an environment of collective accountability and continuous progress. The Scrum framework, as defined in the SBOM guide, is structured in such a way that it supports product and service development in all types of industries and in any type of project, irrespective of its complexity. Here another question arises. Why is Scrum better than other project management techniques? A key strength of Scrum lies in its use of cross-functional, self-organized, and empowered teams who divide their work into short, concentrated work cycles called sprints. Think of sprints as short time spans in which a certain amount of work must be done. Take a look at this diagram, which illustrates the Scrum project's flow. As you can see, the Scrum cycle begins with a stakeholder meeting, during which the project vision is created. The product owner then develops a prioritized product backlog, which contains a prioritized list of business and project requirements, written in the form of user stories. Each sprint begins with a sprint planning meeting, during which high-priority user stories are considered for inclusion in the sprint. A sprint generally lasts between 1 and 6 weeks and involves the Scrum team working to create potentially shippable deliverables or product increments. During the sprint, short, highly focused daily stand-up meetings are conducted where team members discuss daily progress. Toward the end of the sprint, a sprint review meeting is held, during which the product owner and relevant stakeholders are provided a demonstration of the deliverables. The product owner accepts the deliverables only if they meet the predefined acceptance criteria. The sprint cycle ends with a retrospect sprint meeting, where the team discusses ways to improve processes and performance as they move forward into the subsequent sprint. I hope you enjoyed this quick overview and learning about the project's flow in Scrum, and I'll see you in the next module, where we will briefly discuss the history of Scrum. And thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Master course. So far, in our journey towards Scrum, we have learned how to use the Scrum body of knowledge. In many of the previous videos, we have only mentioned the Scrum principles. Now, in this module, we will look at these principles more closely. So why are these principles so important? Because the Scrum principles are the core guidelines for applying the Scrum framework and should always be used in all Scrum projects. So let's take a look at these principles. The 6 Scrum principles are empirical process control, self-organization, collaboration, value-based prioritization, time boxing, and iterative development. You can see how they are arranged in this diagram. Note that Scrum principles can be applied to any type of project in any organization and should always be followed in order to ensure effective implementation of the Scrum framework. Scrum principles are non-negotiable and should be applied as specified in the SBOT guide. Keeping the principles intact and using them appropriately instills confidence in. Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Master course. So far, in our journey towards Scrum, we have learned how to use the Scrum body of knowledge. In many of the previous videos, we have only mentioned the Scrum principles. Now, in this module, we will look at these principles more closely. So why are these principles so important? Because the Scrum principles are the core guidelines for applying the Scrum framework and should always be used in all Scrum projects. So let's take a look at these principles. The 6 Scrum principles are empirical process control, self-organization, collaboration, value-based prioritization, time boxing, and iterative development. You can see how they are arranged in this diagram. Note that Scrum principles can be applied to any type of project in any organization and should always be followed in order to ensure effective implementation of the Scrum framework. Scrum principles are non-negotiable and should be applied as specified in the SBOT guide. Keeping the principles intact and using them appropriately instills confidence in the Scrum framework with regard to attaining the objectives of the project. On the other hand, the Scrum aspects and processes can be modified to meet the requirements of the project or the organization. Following is a detailed look at each principle, beginning with empirical process control. This principle emphasizes the core philosophy of Scrum, based on the 3 main ideas of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The second principle is self-organization. It focuses on today's workers who deliver significantly greater value when encouraged to self-organize, rather than working under command and control style of traditional project management. The third principle, collaboration, focuses on the 3 core dimensions related to collaborative work. That is, awareness, articulation, and appropriation. It also advocates project management as a shared value creation process, with teams working and interacting together to deliver the greatest value. The fourth principle is value-based prioritization. This principle highlights the focus of Scrum to deliver maximum business value, beginning early in the project and continuing throughout. The fifth principle is time boxing. This principle emphasizes time as a limiting constraint in Scrum. Time boxing is used to help effectively manage project planning and execution. Time-boxed elements in Scrum include sprints, daily stand-up meetings, sprint planning meetings, and sprint review meetings. And finally, we have iterative development as the 6th principle. This principle defines iterative development and emphasizes how to better manage changes and build projects that satisfy customer needs. It also delineates the product owners and organization's responsibilities related to iterative development. That covers the 6 Scrum principles. These will continue to be developed throughout our other course modules. Thank you for learning with us. Previously, we saw the key principles of Scrum in detail. This module will introduce you to the various aspects of Scrum, which must all be addressed and managed through a Scrum project. The 5 Scrum aspects that we will discuss in this module are organization, business justification, quality, change, and risk. In the SBOT guide, all 5 Scrum aspects are presented in chapters 3 through 7. We will be discussing all of them one by one, but let's first start with the very first aspect, organization. For now, let's keep the key concepts under the organization aside and try to understand the defined roles and responsibilities in a Scrum project. Why? Because defined roles and responsibilities ensures the successful implementation of Scrum. Evidently, Scrum roles fall into 2 broad categories, core roles and non-core roles. Core roles are those that are involved in producing the project's product or service. Individuals who are assigned core roles are fully committed to the project. They are ultimately responsible for the success of each project iteration and of the project as a whole. Core roles are assigned to the product owner, Scrum Master, and the Scrum team. Now that we have seen that there are a few inevitable names associated with the core roles, let's meet them one by one and see what they do in a Scrum-controlled project. First, we have the product owner, who is the person responsible for achieving maximum business value for the project. He or she is also responsible for articulating customer requirements and maintaining business justification for the project. The product owner represents the voice of the customer. Next is the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is a facilitator who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to completing the project successfully. The Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project. The Scrum Master clears impediments for the team and ensures that all the Scrum processes are being followed. To clarify, here's an example. This is ABC Corporation. The software development team at ABC is facing roadblocks lately. Why? Well, it seems that they are unable to live up to the set standards of a project in terms of quality. What is the stumbling block here? Lack of expertise required for the project. It, in turn, leads to delay. So this is where the Scrum Master is going to pitch in. How is he or she going to do that? First of all, the task of the Scrum Master will be to focus on finding ways to clear the impediment, which comes in the form of lack of expertise required for the project. How is this possible? Well, the Scrum Master at this juncture is either going to raise an immediate requirement for hiring software developers with required expertise, or he can make an arrangement for training the existing staff. The Scrum Master will now make a decision based on the cost-effectiveness and time consumption of the action to be taken. Finally, it's now the turn of the Scrum team. They actually do the work. The Scrum team is the group or team of people who are responsible for understanding the requirements specified by the product owner and creating the deliverables of the project. So, considering the earlier example, the software development team, either with newly recruited experts or with newly acquired training, will proceed in accordance with the requirements set by the product owner. Now, let's take a closer look at the non-core roles. The non-core roles are optional and may include all team members who are interested in the project. They have no formal role in the project team, but they may interface with the team. However, they may not be responsible for the success of the project. The non-core roles should be taken into account in any Scrum project. So, who is involved in non-core roles? Stakeholders, the Scrum guidance body, and the vendors. Let's meet these people one by one. The first role is the stakeholder or stakeholders. This is a collective term that includes customers, users, and sponsors. They frequently communicate with the Scrum core team and influence the project throughout the project's development. Most importantly, it is for the stakeholders that the project produces the collaborative benefits. Second is the Scrum guidance body, which is also referred to as the SGB. It is an optional role consisting of a set of documents or a group of experts, typically involved in defining objectives related to quality, government regulations, security, and other key organizational parameters. This Scrum guidance body guides the work carried out by product owner, Scrum Master, and Scrum team. The next non-core role is played by the vendors. They include external individuals or internal organizations that provide products or services that are not within the core competencies of the project organization. Now, to help you understand how the Scrum organizational structure works, we have a diagram here. The roles played by the Scrum Master, Product Owner, Scrum Team, and the interrelation of these roles, and the way in which each one of them contributes to fulfilling customer requirements, are summarized here. The organization aspect of Scrum also addresses the team structure requirements to implement Scrum in programs and portfolios. So now that we have seen the core and non-core roles played in a Scrum-controlled project, let's now discuss another key Scrum aspect, business justification. It's important for an organization to perform a proper business assessment prior to starting any project. This helps the key decision makers understand the business need for change or for a new product or service, the justification for moving forward with a project, and its viability. Business justification in Scrum is based on the concept of value-driven delivery. One of the key characteristics of any project is the uncertainty of results or outcomes. It is impossible to guarantee project success at completion, regardless of the size or complexity of a project. Considering this uncertainty of achieving success, Scrum attempts to start delivering results as early in the project as possible. This early delivery of results, and thereby value, provides an opportunity for reinvestment and proves the worth of the project to interested stakeholders. Furthermore, Scrum's adaptability allows the project's objectives and processes to change if its business justification changes. It is important to note that although the product owner is primarily responsible for business justification, other team members also contribute significantly. So far, we have seen two important Scrum aspects. Quality is the third aspect we are going to discuss now. In Scrum, quality is defined as the ability of the completed product or deliverables to meet the acceptance criteria and achieve the business value expected by the customer. To ensure that a project meets its quality requirements, Scrum adopts an approach of continuous improvement, whereby the team learns from experience and stakeholder engagement to constantly keep the prioritized product backlog updated with any changes in requirements. The prioritized product backlog is simply never complete until the closure or termination of the project. Moreover, any changes to the requirements reflect changes in the internal and external business environment and allow the team to continually work and adapt to achieve those requirements. Through repetitive testing, Scrum requires work to be completed incrementally through sprints, rather than waiting until the end to produce deliverables. This means that errors get fixed right away, instead of being postponed until the end of the project. Moreover, important quality-related tasks, for example, development, testing, and documentation, are completed as part of the same sprint by the same team. This ensures that quality is inherent in any deliverable created as part of a sprint. Such deliverables from Scrum projects, which are potentially shippable, are also referred to as done. For example, if internal customers are not happy with a product delivered in terms of quality, the issues can be listed in the prioritized product backlog. These kinds of issues will be addressed during the sprints, and the team will try to fix them so that quality is not compromised. Thus, continuous improvement with repetitive testing optimizes the probability of achieving the expected quality levels in a Scrum project. Constant discussions between the Scrum core team and stakeholders, including customers and users, with actual increments of the product being delivered at the end of every sprint, ensures that the gap between customer expectations from the project and actual deliverables produced is constantly reduced. The Scrum guidance body may also provide guidelines about quality, which may be relevant to all Scrum projects in the organization. The next aspect that we're going to discuss here is change, another very important aspect of Scrum. Every project, regardless of its method or framework used, is exposed to change. It is imperative that project team members understand that the Scrum development processes are designed to embrace change. Organizations should try to maximize the benefits that arise from change and minimize any negative impacts through diligent change management processes in accordance with the principles of Scrum. A primary principle of Scrum is its acknowledgement, which are as follows. First, stakeholders, for example, customers, users, and sponsors, change their minds about what they want and need throughout a project, which is sometimes referred to as requirements churn. Second, it is very difficult, if not impossible, for stakeholders to define all requirements during project initiation. Scrum projects welcome change by using short, iterative sprints that incorporate customer feedback on each sprint's deliverables. This enables the customer to regularly interact with the Scrum team members, view deliverables as they're ready, and change requirements, if needed, earlier in the sprint. Also, the portfolio or program management teams can respond to change requests pertaining to Scrum projects applicable at their level. Let's now look at the last Scrum aspect, which is risk. What is risk, and how do you define it? Risk is defined as an uncertain event or set of events that can affect the objectives of a project and may contribute to its success or failure. Risks that are likely to have a positive impact on the project are referred to as opportunities, whereas threats are risks that could affect the project in a negative manner. For example, consider a situation in which one of the key investors in a project backs off at a prime moment. This is a risk affecting the project in a negative way. However, if the project finds a better investor willing to invest in a bigger and better way, it can be considered as an opportunity. Managing risk must be done proactively. It is an iterative process that should begin at project initiation and continue throughout the project's life cycle. The process of managing risks should follow some standardized steps to ensure that risks are identified and evaluated, and that a proper course of action is determined and acted upon accordingly. Risks should be identified, assessed, and responded to on the basis of two factors: These are the probability of each risk's occurrence and the possible impact in the event of such an occurrence. Risks with a high probability and impact value are determined by multiplying both factors, and they should be addressed before those with a relatively lower value. In general, once a risk is identified, it is important to understand the risk with regard to the probable causes and the potential effects if the risk occurs. And with that, we conclude our module on Scrum aspects. I hope this segment was insightful and suggestive of the main aspects of the Scrum framework. I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Master course. Now let's take a closer look at the processes and how they work. You probably remember hearing that a project has a product backlog of prioritized requirements, as well as a product owner who is responsible for prioritizing these requirements. Now the question is, how do you get this work done? First of all, let's define the Scrum processes in general. Scrum processes address the specific activities and flow of a Scrum project. In total, there are 19 processes, which are grouped into 5 phases. These phases are presented in chapters 8 through 12 of the SBOT guide. These 5 phases describe each process in detail, including the associated inputs, tools, and outputs. Also, in each process, some inputs, tools, and outputs are designated as mandatory, while others are designated as optional. The decision to include any optional input, tool, and/or output depends on the particular project, organization, or industry. Inputs and outputs denoted as mandatory are important for the successful implementation of Scrum in any organization. Next, we'll take a closer look at the phases and the processes enlisted under them. Initiate is the first phase, and the processes carried out as part of Initiate are as follows. Create project vision is the first process performed. In this process, the project business case is reviewed to create a project vision statement that will serve as the inspiration and provide focus for the entire project. The product owner is identified in this process. Identify Scrum Master and stakeholders is the second process, during which the Scrum Master is identified using specific selection criteria. Form Scrum Team is the third process in the Initiate phase. In this process, Scrum team members are identified. Normally, the product owner has the primary responsibility of selecting team members, but he or she often chooses the team in collaboration with the Scrum Master. The fourth process is Develop Epics. In this process, the project vision statement serves as the basis for developing epics, which are large, unrefined user stories. User group meetings may be held to develop epics. Create a prioritized product backlog is the next process. In this process, epics and unrefined user stories are refined and elaborated, then prioritized to create a prioritized product backlog for the project. The done criteria is also established at this point. The last process classified under the Initiate phase is Conduct Release Planning. In this process, the Scrum core team reviews the user stories in the prioritized product backlog to develop a release planning schedule, which is essentially a phased deployment schedule that can be shared with the project stakeholders. The second phase we're going to learn is Plan and Estimate, and these are processes grouped under this phase. First is Create User Stories. We can see that in this process, user stories and their related user story acceptance criteria are created. User stories are usually written by the product owner and are designed to ensure that the customer's requirements are clearly depicted and can be fully understood by all the stakeholders. User story writing exercises may be held. This involves Scrum team members creating the user stories. User stories are incorporated into the prioritized product backlog.
Now let's look at the mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of Estimate and Commit User Stories process. The mandatory inputs are Scrum Core Team and User Stories. For detailed explanation of these inputs, please refer to the discussions on these in the Create User Stories process. The tool that is to be mandatorily used as part of this process is estimation methods. Numerous estimation methods can be used as tools to estimate user stories. Some important tools are: let's begin with Wideband Delphi. Wideband Delphi is a group-based estimation technique for determining how much work is involved and how long it will take to complete. Individuals within a team anonymously provide estimations for each item, and the initial estimates are plotted on a chart. The team then discusses the factors that influence their estimates and proceed to a second round of estimation. This process is repeated until the estimates of individuals are close to each other and a consensus for the final estimates can be reached. The second technique is planning poker. It is also called estimation poker. It is a derivative of the wideband Delphi technique. This is an estimation technique which uses consensus to estimate relative sizes of user stories or the effort required to create them. Next technique is Fist of Five. It is a simple and fast mechanism that can be used as an estimation practice as well as a general group consensus building technique. After initial discussion on a given item for estimation, the Scrum team members are each asked to vote on a scale of 1 to 5 using their fingers. Used as an estimation tool, the number of fingers displayed indicate the relative estimation value. The value in using this technique is not only consensus building, but also driving discussion because team members are asked to explain the reason for their estimates. Used as a general consensus building technique, the proposal or pending decision under consideration is initially discussed. Then, the team members vote based on their level of agreement and desire for discussion. If a team member raises one finger, it means he or she disagrees with the group's conclusion and has major concerns. If a team member raises 2 fingers, it means he or she disagrees with the group's conclusion and would like to discuss some minor issues. If a team member raises 3 fingers, it means he or she is not sure and would like to go with the group's consensus conclusion. If a team member raises 4 fingers, it means he or she agrees with the group's conclusion and would like to discuss some minor issues. And if a team member raises 5 fingers, it means he or she wholeheartedly agrees with the group's conclusion. The last technique is affinity estimation. It is a technique used to quickly estimate a large number of user stories. Using sticky notes or index cards and tape, the team places user stories on a wall or other surface in order from small to large. For this, each team member begins with a subset of user stories from the overall prioritized product backlog to place by relative size. This initial placement is done in silence. Once everyone has placed their user stories on the wall, the team reviews all of the placements and may move user stories around as appropriate. The second part of the exercise involves discussion. Finally, the product owner will indicate some sizing categories on the wall. These categories can be small, medium, or large, or they may be numbered using story point values to indicate relative size. The team will then move user stories into these categories as the final step in the process. Some key benefits of this approach are that the process is very transparent, visible to everyone, and is easy to conduct. The mandatory output of this process is estimated user stories. After the user stories are estimated by the Scrum team using the various estimation techniques discussed in this section, they are considered to be estimated user stories. The next process is commit user stories. The mandatory inputs of this process are Scrum core team, estimated user stories, and length of sprint. For detailed explanation of these inputs, please refer to the discussion on them in Develop Epics, Estimate User Stories, and Conduct Release Planning Processes. The mandatory tools used in this process are Sprint Planning Meeting and Communication Techniques. The Sprint Planning Meeting is used by the Scrum team in the Commit User Stories process to plan the work to be done in the sprint. The team reviews the estimated user stories in order to commit the user stories which they can deliver within the sprint. The next tool is Communication Techniques. Scrum promotes accurate and effective communication primarily through co-location of the Scrum team. Scrum also favors informal, face-to-face interactions over formal written communications. When a Scrum team needs to be distributed, the Scrum Master should ensure that effective communication techniques are available so that the team can self-organize, collaborate, and work effectively. The mandatory output of this process is committed user stories. The Scrum team commits to a subset of estimated user stories that they believe they can complete in the next sprint based upon velocity. The committed user stories should also be selected per the priorities defined by the product owner. Now let's discuss the mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of Identified Task process. The mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of this process are Scrum Core Team, Committed User Stories, Task Planning Meetings, and Task List, respectively. Please refer to the discussion on the mandatory inputs of the Create User Stories and Estimate User Stories processes for a better understanding of Scrum Core Team. The tool that must be used mandatorily in this process is sprint planning meetings. In sprint planning meetings, the Scrum team plans the work to be done in the sprint by reviewing the committed user stories at the top of the prioritized product backlog. The product owner is present during this meeting to clear ambiguities related to user stories in the prioritized product backlog. This meeting should be time-boxed with the standard length limited to 2 hours per week of the sprint duration. This assists in preventing the tendency to stray into discussions that should actually occur in other meetings like the release planning or sprint review meetings. The mandatory output of this process is task list. The task list is a comprehensive list that contains all the tasks to which the Scrum team has committed for the current sprint. It contains description of each task along with estimates derived during the create task process. The task list must include any testing and integration efforts so that the product increment from the sprint can be successfully integrated into the deliverables from previous sprints. Even though tasks are often activity-based, the level of granularity to which the tasks are decomposed is decided by the Scrum team. Now let's discuss the mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of the Estimate Tasks process. The mandatory inputs are Scrum Core Team and Task List, whereas the mandatory tools are sprint planning meetings, estimation criteria, and estimation methods. And the mandatory output is the Effort Estimated Task List. For a good understanding of the mandatory inputs of this process, please refer to the discussion on the inputs of the Create User Stories process and to the discussion on the output of the Identify Task process. The tools that must be mandatorily used in this process are sprint planning meetings and estimation criteria. In sprint planning meetings, the Scrum team members use the task list to estimate the duration and effort for the user stories to be completed in the sprint. One of the key benefits of this technique is that it enables the team to have a shared perspective on the user stories and requirements so they can reliably estimate the effort required. The information gathered in the sprint planning meeting is included in the effort estimated task list and used to determine the velocity for the sprint. The next tool is estimation criteria. Estimation criteria can be expressed in numerous ways, with two common examples being story points and ideal time. Story point values are used to represent relative or comparative effort to complete tasks, whereas ideal time normally describes the number of hours a Scrum team member works exclusively on developing the project's deliverables, without including any time spent on other activities or work that is outside the project. Estimation criteria make it easier for the Scrum team to estimate effort and enable them to evaluate and address inefficiencies when necessary. The last mandatory tool is estimation methods. For a good understanding of this tool, please refer to the discussion on it in the Estimate User Stories process. The mandatory output of this process is Effort Estimated Task List. The Effort Estimated Task List is a list of tasks associated with the committed user stories included in a sprint. Typically, the accuracy of estimates varies with team skills. Estimated effort is expressed in terms of estimation criteria agreed on by the team. The Effort Estimated Task List is used by the Scrum team during sprint planning meetings to create the sprint backlog and sprint burndown chart. It is also used to determine when the team needs to reduce its commitment or can take on additional user stories during sprint planning.